Azure, Azure, Azure. When I started giving Azure interviews, I was just a developer then. And honestly, I knew nothing about Azure then. I still remember I faced many rejections because I was preparing the wrong way. But somehow, I cracked the interview and worked on real Azure projects. Now, I can help you in cracking Azure interviews and save yourself from many rejections. Today, I am going to share the top 10 most asked Azure interview questions for beginners. And yes, I will explain each question step by step like this with simple diagram and simple definition. Because visuals, diagrams are simple to understand and remember for longer duration, right? And you really understand when you will really understand when and why to use Azure concepts in real applications in this video. Even if you are completely new to Azure, by the end of this video you will feel like you already have some experience in Azure. And after watching this, you will be ready to face any Azure interview with confidence. So let's start with the first question. What are the main cloud service models? Explain the difference between IaaS, PaaS and SaaS. Okay, with Azure example. Now very important question. Now maybe you heard about these before also, but today after listening to this answer, you will feel more confident. Okay. See, when I was working as a developer, I was 90% of time working in the application code and database. Okay. But to manage one production application end to end, there are many more things required. For example, to manage an application in your company, these many things are required. Here, application and data mostly managed by developers. Okay. Then there is an IT or the infra team who will perform these rest of the things like installing Java or .NET runtime softwares on servers so that your application can run. Then might be your application using some third-party API or application like some middleware is there. Maybe your application is using MS Office, then that will be installed. Then installing OS, Windows or Linux. Then virtualization is the technology that create virtual versions of the hardware. Okay. Then IT team have to maintain the servers, like running antivirus, keep checking the server performance. Okay. Then they have to keep the enough storage so that your application data, images, files, everything should work smoothly. And finally, networking means your systems must be like properly connected inside your company. Okay, all should be connected. So this is the job of developer, and this is the job of your IT team of your company. So this is the whole computing stack which is required to run a application. Okay. Now, in the case of on-premises, all these on-premises means if these servers are present in your company, all these jobs will be done by your company only. Okay. Now, Microsoft Azure or any other cloud services will basically provide these service model layers from which your company can choose. Okay. Managed by the company, as I said, it's all managed by the company. But if your company, Azure provide three types. First is IaaS, infrastructure as a service. Here, these four services, virtualization, servers, and storage, networking will be managed by the Azure. Okay. So, and your company have to manage only this top 5 things, meaning now your company employees have less work to do. So relax. Okay. After IaaS, the next most popular platform is PaaS, platform as a service. Here, you and your company will primarily work on the application and data only. Okay. All the other services Azure will provide. But yes, your company or you as an Azure developer will have to configure and monitor these services. But most part will done by Azure only. Next and the last one is SaaS, which is software as a service. Okay, here everything including the application and data are managed by Azure only. For example, there is a SaaS application, Microsoft 365. Your company can take this SaaS service from Microsoft and your company employees have to just use it. Your company do not have to any development around it. Everything Azure will control. So that is SaaS. So that is the short story of IaaS, PaaS and SaaS. Now listen carefully. All these these elements are just categories, not actual services. Actual Azure services are different. Every category will have some services. For example, virtual machines is a service which is the part of like the servers category. Okay, and then storage, we have many storage types in Azure. And as a Azure developer, you have to work mostly on implementing those services only. So in the upcoming question, we will explore the services and not the categories, because services are important, but you should be aware about these categories. Okay, I hope now you are clear. In the future, as an Azure developer, you have to mostly work in the IaaS or the PaaS. Okay, on premises, no, it's not for the Azure developer. SaaS, there is nothing much the Azure developer can do. Okay, only IaaS and PaaS model, and PaaS is generally more famous. If your company is small and they are just getting into Azure, and if you are a new developer, then you have to learn more about PaaS, and later you will be learning more about the IaaS. Okay, great. So that is the explanation. Finally, I have put all the simple and minimum information about these categories here, which I already explained, but I have put all this in the book also, so that you can easily remember it and later you can easily revise it also, because every time listening the video is not a great idea. Your team wants to avoid purchasing servers for a new app. What Azure model you suggest? Okay, pause the video, think for a second for the answer. Done? Okay, so the answer is recommend PaaS, platform as a service. Like Azure App Service is the perfect example of platform as a service. Why? You have to give the reason also. You just do not have to say yes or no or single word answer. You have to give the reason. Because PaaS removes the need to manage servers and allows the team to focus on code, while Azure handles everything else: hosting, scaling, updates, everything else. Okay, that's how we will be going to cover more questions, like around 9 to 10 questions more. And yes, if you have not yet accepted my never give up challenge, then do accept it. Keep giving the interviews until you get the success like these candidates. And the day you get success, share your success story with me. Write never give up in comments to accept the challenge. What is a resource in Azure? What is the difference between a service and a resource in Azure? Yeah, I know it's very easy, but I do not want to take any chance for any confusion. So let's quickly understand this. Let's first go to the Azure portal. Okay. Here you can, on the right, you can find this create resource button, right? This is the create resource. When you click it, it will ask you to select some service. Okay. For example, I search for virtual machine. Okay. Here I will search. And then I found this virtual machine here. So I will open it. Okay. Now listen carefully. This is a service virtual machine provided by the Azure. Now here, if I will press the create buttons, that means an instance of virtual machine service will be created in my Azure account. And that instance of virtual machine we call resource. Okay. So basically, after creating the resource, I can use it for my purpose for hosting some application, whatever. So I can host basically my applications on virtual machine. Okay, now similarly I can create multiple resources in my Azure account from different services. Hope you got the point. Let's go back to the slide. So now for example, in Azure there we have these many services: storage account, virtual machine, database. All these are services, right? Now your company, Azure developer, or you can use these services by creating the instance of these services in Azure, and those created instances in Azure will be called the resources. Okay, a very simple example. For example, if you are a developer, then understand Azure service is like a class and Azure resource is like an object or instance of that class which actually works. Class is just logical, object do the real thing, right? Same, resource do the real thing. Great, now you have 100% know what resources are. If yes, then write crystal clear in the comments or chat box to feel some confidence. Okay, finally here is the simple and easy to remember definition. A resource in Azure is any individually manageable component that you can create, configure and use in the cloud. Basically it's an instance of service which you can use for your purpose. Okay, now here is the same difference between a resource and a service which I already explained, but I am writing it here so that later you can easily revise it from the book. Okay, now to manage these resources in a better way, we can group them. Okay, that we call resource groups, and that I will explain you in the upcoming question. What are resource groups in Azure? Why do we use them in projects? Get ready, by the end you can explain this concept to anyone. So from the name itself you can understand resource group is the grouping of resources, right? But the main question is, when in the Azure is the requirement to create the resource group? Okay, so let's quickly understand with the help of an example. For example, your company have a web application and it is present inside the Azure cloud. Now to run this application you have created many resources like storage account, virtual machines for hosting your application, SQL database for database of your application, right? So you have created these many resources in your Azure cloud. Now you can put all these resources inside a resource group like this: product development resource group 1. Why we created this resource group? Because then all these resources will be under this development resource group and only developers in your company will have the access for it. Similarly, when the development is done, you can create the same kind of resources which you can put inside this testing resource group like this: product testing resource group 2. So these are different resources, okay, and above one are different. So basically now these testing resource groups are available to both development team and testing team or any other team. Similarly, if you have the production environment or the UAT environment, we can create a separate resource group and inside there will be different sets of resources. So getting my point? So now if like me you are from the development background, then understand Azure services are like the classes, the resources are like the objects, and resource group are like the collection of objects like the lists or namespaces. Okay, so that is the analogy. In short, we use resource group to organize the resources properly. Great, so that is the best answer you have ever heard of, right? And here is the simple definition of resource group. A resource group in Azure is a logical container that holds related Azure resources. Okay, So that is the definition. And why to use resource group? Because it allows you to manage, organize all your resources in efficiently and in a better way. Okay, so things are written here, and now you have a clear understanding of what is resource groups, right? Quick update before the next question. I cracked Azure interview after facing many rejections. From that experience, I created this complete Azure interview course. This course includes 5 things. Number 5, 200 interview questions, all topics step by step, even if you are an Azure beginner. Fourth, real scenario based questions just like in real interviews. Third, you can check your interview preparation status by marking questions prepared or not prepared. Second is this PDF book for quick revision. And first is Azure top 10 mock interviews. Many students cracked interviews using my courses. You can be the next. Course and book links are given in the description. If you are interested, great. If not, no worries. Let's continue with the next question. What are Azure virtual machines? When would you use them in a project? Now I am going to share the answer which can crack your interview. I already talked about Azure virtual machine, but let's seal it. Here you can see a simple diagram, like we have the servers, okay, and the physical machines where the applications is hosted or installed in production to handle the user requests. Now, same way, in Azure cloud we can have these servers as the virtual machines. Inside this we will install our application, okay. In short, we use virtual machines for hosting applications and for many other purposes also. So that's it. Here is the easy and simple definition. Azure virtual machines are cloud-based virtual servers that allow users to run applications without needing physical hardware. Meaning companies do not have to maintain their own servers now. Very simple analogy is, think of Azure VM is like a computer present in the cloud, okay, like a server, just like a physical computer which needs operating system, CPU, RAM, storage. So that all together is called virtual machine, okay. So that's it. And here I have written the same thing which I already explained, so that later you can easily revise. What is Azure App Service? For what purpose can you use them? If you are from a development background, then you are going to use this service the most in Azure. This is the most important service for you. If you remember this past diagram, which is like platform as a service, then here as a developer, you have to only provide application and data, right? So how Azure will accept your application data? How you will do this? By creating Azure App Services in the Azure. Okay, you do not have to worry about any of these, the servers, operating system, nothing. Okay, you will not create virtual machines. You just have to create the Azure App Service, and you have to deploy your application as the Azure App Service. Okay, so now, like this, if you need any web app or a API app or mobile app or logics app, the way of deploy them in the Azure App Service in the Azure is via the Azure App Service. Okay. Here is the simple and easy to remember definition. Azure App Service is a fully managed platform as a service that enables developer to host web applications, APIs, mobile backends without managing the underlying infrastructure. So now you will say, okay, when we already have virtual machine where we can host the application, then why we need Azure App Service? See, virtual machines are example of IaaS, because there you have only the server. Now inside the server you have to manage anything. You have to manage the OS, you have to manage the middleware, the storage, everything. That is just a server, blank server, virtual machine. But Azure App Service is slightly like more abstract. It's slightly like you do not have to worry about all these things which will be managed by Azure. Okay, and yes, I will explain that in detail in the upcoming question. What are the differences between Azure App Services and virtual machine, when to use what. And also in the upcoming question, I will cover some features of the Azure App Services, because of which these are so important, especially if you are a developer. What are Azure functions? Have you ever used them in your project? Why? Trust me, if you are from development background, then this is the question that can get you the selection in the interview. And today I will give you the selection answer. Let's first understand with the help of the example. Suppose you and your development team have created a web application inside Azure. You have the front end, which can be in Angular, React, JavaScript. Then front end will pass the request to the API server, which can be in .NET, Java, Node, right? Then if there is any database, then the backend will get the data from the database. So these front end, backend can be inside the virtual machines or can be in the app service also. Okay, Azure App Service. Now there is a user and he is doing, for example, sign up in your application. Now suppose while signing up, user is uploading his photo or some image document. That photo will be stored in the Azure Blob storage, which I will explain in upcoming question. In short, in Azure Blob storage is used for storing images. Okay, clear until now? So this is the basic thing. Now listen carefully. As the images user is uploading, and maybe the images are of very large size and they are taking too much space inside your Azure Blob storage. Because of those large images, your company Azure billing cost will increase, because larger images will need larger storage, meaning larger cost, right? Now as an Azure developer, you come up with a solution, an idea, and you created one service in Azure, which is a Azure function. Remember, Azure function is just a piece of code, okay? And that piece of code you will write inside the Azure function, and that function you will apply on this Azure Blob storage. So what will happen? Whenever any image will come to the Azure Blob storage, then on that one event will be triggered, will be invoked, and immediately and automatically this Azure function will be called, and the code inside the Azure function will be executed automatically, and that code will compress the size of the image which is just arrived. Okay, so as soon as the image will arrive in Blob storage, it will be compressed by the Azure function code. Okay, so as a result, all the images inside the Azure Blob storage are stored in the compressed form, which will take less storage, meaning low Azure cost for your company, right? And you will get the Employee of the Month award. So great. So that is one example. But this is a very common example, and if you say this example in the interview, then interviewer will think that you have read it somewhere. So there is one more example, very simple example. Suppose you want to ensure that whenever user signs up, okay, then one welcome email will be automatically sent to the user. Okay, for that you can write one Azure function which will be triggered automatically as soon as the front end server will receive the sign up request from the user. Okay, and this Azure function will be sending the welcome email to the user. Okay, that's it. So now I am sure Azure function purpose is 100% clear to you. It is used to trigger some activity, some code is written inside it which will activate whenever there is a trigger. Okay, and here is the simple and very easy to remember definition. Azure function is a serverless compute service in Azure that lets you run code in response to events without managing infrastructure. Okay, and here is the advantage of function. It automatically scales and executes only when triggered, making it cost efficient and lightweight. Means if your code is there in the Azure and only when it is triggering, then only it will cost you. Otherwise, it will not cost you anything. Okay, meaning some event must happen to trigger the functions. Alright, now if you want to revise for your interviews, then just you have to take the simple look of this clean and clear diagram and the definition, and the revision will be done. And right, and if you understand everything which I explained, then write crystal clear in the comments or chat. That will give you confidence and you will never forget this concept. Okay, now in the interviews they can also ask one indirect question to you about Azure function, that why don't you write the Azure function code directly inside your main application. For example, if the code which is used for compressing the image can be directly written inside the application, right? So why are you not doing that? So that I will answer you in the upcoming question. What is Azure storage? What are the types of Azure storage? Now, after listening to this, you will feel more confident. As a developer, you know there are different types of files which your application can handle, right? Which your application handles. For example, there are readable files like Word, PDF, then there are image files like PNG, JPG, then there are text files or CSV files, Excel files, right? So to handle different types of data, different types of storage we have in Azure. Okay, and the first and very popular and very useful one is the blob storage. Here it is, and here it is the purpose. The blob storage is used to store unstructured data like images, videos and backups. So this is the Azure blob storage service which is available in the Azure. Second, you can use the Azure file storage server, which is basically provide the cloud-based shared file storage. Shared file means the files you will store in this file storage will be easily accessible to others, to your team members. Okay. Third is table storage, which stores the large scale NoSQL key value data for fast lookups. Now this NoSQL, what is it is that I have covered in another question. But table storage, you can see tabular format data like the key value pairs data. Okay. And the last one is queue storage, which manages message based communication between application and that I have. This is just one line description. In upcoming questions, I will explain in detail what and when to use this storage for your application. Okay. Before that, here is a simple and easy to remember definition of Azure storage. Azure storage is a cloud-based storage solution from Microsoft Azure that lets you store and access data over the internet. That's it. What is Azure SQL database? How is it different from regular SQL server? Very simple, no explanation needed. Here is the diagram, and if you have some development background, you know, like we have SQL server, same way in the Azure we have this Azure SQL database. Okay, same, it's almost same. Okay, and only the difference is it is used as the platforms as a service in Azure. Okay, meaning it's only available in Azure. Simple definition is here. Azure SQL Database is fully managed cloud-based relational database service provided by Microsoft on Azure. It is built on the SQL Server engine, but it is offered as a platform as a service. Okay. And when I say PaaS, that means Azure SQL Database is only available in the Azure cloud. So this is the theoretical information, and that will help you in the revision from the book, this definition. Okay. What is DevOps and what is Azure DevOps? What is the difference between them? So my answer will clear all your doubts. Okay. First of all, what is DevOps in general? Not in Azure, in general. Here is the diagram. In DevOps, Dev stands for development, where developer will first, what developers do when they started creating an application. First they plan, okay, then they code, then they build the code so that code will successfully compile, and then they test, unit test to whatever testing. Finally they release the application. Okay, then the operations start, which is OPS. Okay, where the application which is released is partially the part of ops and it's also part of the dev. Okay, so next the deployment will be in the UAT environment or the production environment. Maybe the IT team will do, or infra team will do, or the development team can also do it. Okay, so now the next step is operate. Operate means when the your application is in production, so you are operating it. Basically you are if any bugs are coming, anything is happening, so you are operating it. Then the last step is monitor. So basically you are sitting and you are watching your application, how the users are using your application, and you are analyzing basically. Okay, so basically this is the whole step of DevOps. Now what is Azure DevOps? Azure DevOps is a platform, or you can say it's a portal where you can manage the entire DevOps lifecycle, from development to code to deployment to production, smoothly and efficiently, everything. Okay, for example, if you will use Azure DevOps portal, which will look something like this, okay, then you and your team member and your manager can assign and create work items here, check the work status, check the deployment status of application, and everything at one single place, and that is where Azure DevOps platform. Okay, here is the final definition. DevOps equal to development plus operation. It's a concept. Azure DevOps is a tool which is used to implement the DevOps process. Okay, so Azure DevOps is a cloud-based DevOps platform from Microsoft that provides end-to-end tools for software development, CI/CD testing, project management, everything. It enables teams to plan, develop, build, test, and deploy application efficiently. Okay, definition and the theory present in the book so that later you can easily revise. But yes, in the upcoming question, I will also explain what are the elements present in the Azure DevOps platform and how we can use them, so that if anyone will ask you, you can easily answer it. Okay. Great job, my friend, for watching the full video. Most will only talk, but the way you are finishing things shows your seriousness and dedication towards your Azure goal. Now, if this video helped you, then there are many more important questions like the Azure front door, which are also asked in the Azure interviews. All I have explained in my complete course using simple definition and easy to understand visuals. Many of my students have already used my courses to crack their interviews. So if you are also serious about cracking your next Azure interview and do not want to miss a single question, then check out this course link and the PDF book link in the description below.